Hey there, welcome to SUPlift, a place where ideas meet with resources to create something special. Today, our guest is Dsouza. Dan is a program manager at Elmarks. Elmarks, Dan will explain in a second, is a company that seeks for programs that can enhance corporate ventures and people working in companies that want to do something, optimize, innovate from within the company. Hello, Dan. Thank you for being here.
Hi, good to have me. I'm really excited for this, actually, because we've been trying to put it together for a few weeks now, and we've kind of crossed paths, and now we're chatting. So thanks for inviting me. Good to see you.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Yeah. Okay, so let's start. Dan, could you tell us what Elmarks actually is, and what do you do at Elmarks?
Absolutely. So at Elmarks, we've been around since about 2014 started out as an investment vehicle and have turned into a corporate innovator partner. So the mission of Elmarks is that we support businesses to achieve their strategic goals by delivering a portfolio of innovation initiatives. What we've been able to achieve over time is becoming a global innovation specialist, which now we've come up with about 75 different programs with partners around Europe, Asia, and North America. Our big vision, though, is to become the most trusted partner for corporate innovation, and we're doing that through a number of different work streams. So we have the open innovation, which is our biggest work stream, and then we have the new ventures unit, which is consisting of where I'm sat in, intrapreneurship and venture studio. And we've been really lucky to have some very big clients such as Lloyd's of London, BMW, and also some Asian big firms as well. And it's been really exciting for me to be part of that, because I've been really in the creation of the intrapreneurship programs that we run and making that come to fruition. We've opened up the intrapreneurship, as I mentioned, and now most recently the venture studio. The intrapreneurship side of Elmarks is all about tapping into that pool of employees inside a corporate and working alongside them to advise them on turning their ideas into early stage ventures. Whereas the venture studio looks to take ideas from leadership in a corporate and then launch them into innovative and successful businesses. And the hopes are that business will then get slotted back in to the corporate and be a revenue generator. So we've been doing a lot for the last few years, and we've got a long way to go, but excited. Just to go into what I do more specifically as a program manager, I am the client-facing part of the business, where I am doing the workload for the client to help the employees create the businesses, help the employees to validate those businesses, see if there is a place in the market for them, and then I'll then bridge them with the corporate stakeholders to try and get sponsorship and internal investment to make that business come to life.
So, if I understand correctly, intrapreneurship, so not entrepreneurship, is basically for people within the corporate, within the companies that have an idea and that they pitch in to the corporate itself. And do you, as a program, help those employees, or do you help the corporate to fund it, to, let's say, develop the idea? So who is your target? Is the employee your target, or the corporate?
This is where it gets interesting. So we work for the corporate, but our employees are the CEOs of their businesses, right? They're the ones coming up with the business internally, and the corporate are then choosing which ones they want to put more time and resource into. So we're primarily working with the employees on a day-to-day basis, but we will then go to the corporate and say, this is how this business is looking. Here's how you introduce it into your current portfolio of businesses, right? If the corporate is needing our support on how they can actually invest in these businesses. We will help them to create a structure. We're quite lucky so far that the corporates that we work with have very established investment streams,
Hmm.
and they're able to invest in those companies quite readily if they fit with the corporate.
So, because I don't think this is a very known way of, well, I'm going to say ventures, because in the startup community and the entrepreneurship community, we know about VCs, grants, some
Mm.
kind of governmental subsidies, but you don't always talk about the corporate ventures themselves because not a lot of people know about them. I mean, there's a lot of those stories that start your own venture, become an entrepreneur, don't sit in the corporate environment, don't take salary from your CEO, take salary from yourself, and stuff like this. And maybe, I mean, it's pretty interesting to make people know that there is another option. So
Yeah.
is there a possibility to give us a little case study that
Mm.
you have, so that we understand it better? How does it work? Give us like a small case study of maybe your past, or maybe
Mm.
the one you can, I don't know,
Yeah, no,
think about at the moment.
I'll just. I think you tapped into something quite interesting there. Before the case study is that people always think that it's corporates and startups very separate, right?
Hmm.
And what we've aimed to do at Lmarks is bring them together and have collaboration, right? But then a lot of employees are thinking that they need to leave their companies to build their own startup, right? And that in itself creates a lot of risk and a lot of uncertainty, right? And that's where entrepreneurs come to companies like yours and others to seek help and guidance, right?
Yeah.
Whereas what we're doing is we're taking those employees and saying, look, you can retain a salary, you can retain your benefits and perks and your security, but you can also come up with new business concepts inside the business. No, you don't get the 100% ownership sometimes to, reap the rewards of that business becoming successful, but you
Hmm.
retain the security and you become a part of that journey inside the corporate of creating new business. And this opens up a really interesting part to corporate strategy where corporates are very, and we see all the stories about business as usual being bread and butter for corporates, and they usually keep that business as usual until they die off or someone comes and disrupts them. What
Hmm.
we're aiming to do with this new way of innovating with intrapreneurship and venture creation is to give corporates the portfolio of different businesses which they test and try and see what bubbles up to being a potential good business for them, and then they can run with that one rather than just saying, no, this is what we do, this is only
Hmm.
what we do, and if you have other ideas then you can just leave and start your own thing. So I think that corporates in their strategies are becoming more dynamic, and we're still at the beginning. I mean,
Hmm.
innovation's a big buzzword now, but we are still at the beginning of successful execution of innovation,
Hmm.
because a lot of people are talking about different concepts and different ways of doing it and not realizing how they do it, but everyone's talking about it, so there's a bit of confusion there. So going into the case studies, we've worked with one corporate, and I can't name names for confidentiality,
Yeah,
but
no worries.
one uh, global conglomerate which we've created about more than 20 different ventures for them, where
Hmm.
they can then pick and choose which ones they want to invest in and to put more time and resource and more people power onto it to become the next generation businesses for them. We've done that in Americas, we've done it in Asia, we've done it in EMEA, and it's really a case of tapping into the employees and figuring out what ideas in those different regions match up with the corporate strategies and where the corporate vision is, and then helping them to find that early stage validation of, is there a problem in the market, is the
Hmm.
market big enough for the corporate to be interested in, and can we tap into the corporate's assets and capabilities to push this idea forwards? And that's where we get this really nice mix of bringing entrepreneurial skills into the corporate while maintaining that security and
The employees.
large entity for this. A case study
But
that we've been doing. Sorry, over
I
to
just
you.
wanted to ask about those 20 ventures, right? So all of those 20 ventures were given to you by the employees,
Exactly.
or is it like that you had one, and then with your help, it
Mm.
like grew into five or something like, or is it like 20 ventures that you found within the corporate, within the global uh,
Yeah.
company to do?
Yeah. So there's this gives a number of different pathways. So
Hmm.
me personally, I could probably come up with a number of different ideas on the spot, right?
Hmm.
Because of my engagement in the innovation community. However, what we're doing here is creating a culture for employees to become entrepreneurial. So the best way for us to do it is by talking to the employees and getting the ideas from them. So, in that being said, what we do is we go into the employee pool and start to ideate and gather ideas from the employees, and this will go into the tens and hundreds of ideas. Now, it would be nice to have tens and hundreds of ideas, which are all great businesses, but
Of course.
unfortunately, it is a numbers game at the start. And as many other firms have published as well, at the beginning of the intrapreneurship cycle, you can't really differentiate a good and a bad idea. So that's why we need to filter them down and then take them into the process of validation to figure out which ones are the best. So that few hundred ideas will come down and we'll cut about 70% of the ideas, giving feedback to those ideas which didn't make it, because it might be a bad idea, but it might just be the wrong time.
Hmm.
And they just need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what they need to add to the idea for it to be right for that time for that corporate. Very case by case. What we then do is then filter these ideas down to the ones which match up with the corporate priorities, so the strategy of the corporate, and where the corporate can see these ideas slotting into the business. And this is quite subjective, unfortunately.
Hmm.
But there are, as I said, we're very early into this piece of innovation, that there are becoming checklists, right? And we're seeing lots of different checklists, and they're coming together, and we're taking those sorts of thinking and whittling it down into a number suitable for a program,
Hmm.
and then we'll take those through a about 16 to 20 week process of validation, figuring out the business model, figuring out if the financials work, speaking to customers, and all of the cool buzzwords that you hear in the innovation community about getting out the building and
Hmm. Of course.
seeing what works. And then after that, that number is taken down again. So each year we probably have about 4 to 6 which come out each year, and those 20 businesses which we've worked on with this one corporate have been over a period of 2 to 3 years. So this is where we like the corporates and the employees to think about the long game rather than the
Hmm.
quarter on quarter growth, right? You have to be really looking out into the far horizon for all of this innovation work.
Yeah, and definitely where to look if not within your company, right?
Yeah, I
People.
mean, they're on the doorstep. You're
Mm.
working alongside them, and the thing which corporates don't realize is that they have employees which are frontline employees. Their employees are so connected to the customers, whereas management, as Simon Sinek has mentioned in his chats, management have not interacted with customers for a number of years because they've delegated all of that work down the chain. So the best place to find innovation is the people that are interacting with the market the most, which is your employees. Um, what we want employees to do is they can go out and create their own startup, but wouldn't they rather have the security and do it
Mm.
internally, right?
That's incredibly interesting. Um, but you also need quite open-minded executives to
Mm.
go into the intrapreneurship, isn't it?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. It's that's kind of the big challenge, and what we've kind of identified in our process, which is getting the right governance and the right people involved. And that's something that we've really done well at over the last few years, is to basically put together a bit of a framework on who we bring in at the right time and who are the right management figures to take ownership of these sorts of initiatives. And unfortunately, there are a couple of bad apples in that mix, because sometimes you don't have the right people in the executive team who see the same vision as other executives. But we always try to get the right people in the room. And when I say the right people in the room, the people that are have the same vision, have the same understanding, and also want to put in time, because a lot of executives like to delegate, and that's okay because they are very busy people. But if innovation is going to be a big part of your corporate strategy, to either work with startups or to create your own startups or ventures internally, you have to carve out enough time, right? And enough interest on your own behalf.
Yeah. And normally, your ventures that you go within the corporate, are they mostly kind of going into some kind of pivoting,
Mm.
or like some big changes within the company, or is it mostly just one pathway that they try to optimize? Of course,
Yeah.
I presume it's like everything going on, but with your experience, what is the most common one?
In terms of the ventures pivoting,
Yeah, I mean the ventures themselves. Do they go into developing one pathway, expanding the company outside of the borders of a country, or is it a complete pivot and
yeah.
going the other way?
So that here I can bring up a case study which is interesting. So
Hmm.
you are completely right. They can't be static. There has to be room for moving around, and this is where the whole exploration comes around. We worked with a corporate where there was business ideas coming out of Ukraine recently, and just being strictly business and not politicizing this, they then saw what was going on in the region and looked to outsource a little bit of that business model. So they looked to other countries where they could still use the technologies that were coming out of Ukraine, but
Hmm.
then pair that up with areas around the world where they could still fulfill a problem. So they went out to uh, South America to see what sort of problems were arising over there, and taking their whole business structure over to that part of the region. Now, because we're working in a global corporate environment and there's the assets and capabilities and structures in South America to make that happen, the switch wasn't too difficult, right? But there are other ideas if we talk more about a business model perspective,
Hmm.
where a team has gone down a pathway of, right, we've got this assumption and this hypothesis of our business looks like this, it operates like that. And then they realize that actually everything that they realized that they thought at the start isn't actually what the market wants or needs. So they have to then go back to the drawing board and figure out a different approach, right? And that can normally take it can normally be as big as, right, the whole business model collapses. There's key partners or
Hmm.
key channels to the customer which don't work, or it could be something very finite, which is that the product doesn't work and they need
Hmm.
to address certain pieces of the product or the offering. So I always encourage teams in a corporate, or these internal founders, to map out all of the possibilities at the start. What I've heard from a good friend is something called a pre-mortem, which is essentially a post-mortem before anything happens.
Hmm.
So it is coming up with a long list of risks and potential failure points and bottlenecks way beforehand, so that when
Hmm.
you're going through this whole approach of building a venture inside your company, you can then test all of these risk points before you actually hit them. So in a sense, you're doing yourself a favor by being preventative rather than reactionary.
And that's what you help them with as well in
That's what we help
Elmarks.
them with as well.
Uh-huh.
We almost act as we're running a program, but it ends up being very coaching based, right? We're kind of shepherding people through the program and being there for sometimes emotional support. I mean, it's not easy.
So
It's not
definitely.
easy building a venture alongside your day job. You know, it's difficult. So we have to be there as emotional support sometimes, unlicensed, but
Hmm.
also there to coach them around how they do these processes
Yeah,
and how they create a business.
I think startup founders also uh, can feel that, because many
Yeah.
of them also do their day jobs apart from trying to create something new. So yeah, definitely, definitely. And could you tell me, when we talk about corporate,
Hmm.
what do we actually talk about? Because corporate can mean anything. It may be an enormous global company
Yeah.
that is looking to expand, that is looking to different ventures. But how small are we talking? What is the smallest corporate that you can think of? Who can apply to LMARCs?
So there's two sides to this question. The first one is clients, which is our partners, and that
Mm-hmm.
would be large corporates, right? We've worked with some of the biggest in the world, and we continue to bring on new clients which see value in our programs. On the other side, we work with startups to bring into those corporates, right? And that's any stage company which we're looking for, normally around pre-seed, seed stage, because those are the most dynamic companies which are still looking to test their propositions with a customer. And that
Mm-hmm.
customer, a very good customer, can be corporates. So a lot of
All
pre-seed,
right.
seed stage. And then we have a scouting team which will scour globally to find those startups and bring them into the programs after a selection period.
So you don't only look for employees within the corporate, but also from companies outside of corporate that could go into the corporate.
Absolutely. As I said at the start, we have three
Uh-huh.
work streams: open innovation,
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah, you're right.
startup corporate
Mm-hmm.
collaborations, and then we have the new ventures. Now, the reason why we have the new ventures is because we started to have a lot of clients which said, "Look, we've seen the open innovation. That everyone wants to work with startups. Everyone wants to be like a startup. But what we really want to do is create our own internal ventures to add to our innovation strategy. So
Mm-hmm.
we're already doing open innovation with UL Marks. What else do you have?" And so we brought in new resources, hired new people, looked inside at who had experience doing this, and then we created this whole new ventures team. Um, and yeah, so there are multiple work streams. We are providing a suite of services to our corporate partners for innovation.
Yeah, sorry. I think I got really excited about this investment, those ventures from within
Yeah.
the company, because I don't think I've heard a lot. I was, of course, preparing for our talk today, but I got really excited about it, and that's why I just left the whole startup world outside. But yeah, so those corporate, when you pitch, when you give them startups that can help them, that can um, develop or just make their company better, do
Mm,
they just use the startup, become a client of the startup, or do they, let's say,
mm,
swallow it and just
sure.
integrate it within the company?
It's a good question. I actually used to be a scout at Elmarks when I started, before I
Mm-hmm.
got into the program side of the company. So I was essentially looking for the companies the
Uh-huh.
startups to work with the corporates. I can't give you a really detailed breakdown of how those interactions work because it's simply not my expertise. But
Mm-hmm.
from a broad perspective, startups will come into our programs to work with the corporates, and what they'll do is test their technologies out. It's almost like a show and tell piloting of their technologies. And the hope is that either a number of things happen. Either the corporate decides to commercialize with the startup. So, as you said, being a client, a first customer, and a very large one.
Mm-hmm.
Or they could look to get investment. So the corporate sometimes says, look, we really love this company. They're right up our street. They're doing similar work to us. We want to make a small investment into that. And we've had multiple successes where startups have come to us and said, because of your program, we've had X corporate invest money into us, which we just wouldn't have in other corporate accelerator programs. And that's always really good for us to hear, because we know that we're doing something good and valuable for both corporates who are paying us, but also startups who we're essentially asking them to help us, startups. A lot of the time we're just giving the startups access in the hopes that they perform well for the corporates, and there's kind of a big win-win scenario that happens. I don't like the term swallowing up,
Yeah.
because the whole purpose is collaboration, right? And if a corporate's just looking to buy and kill a startup, then they're probably not the right corporate for us to be working with, because we hope that there's either collaboration in terms of commercial deals or investment opportunities for the corporate. And that's kind of the two pathways which we love to see.
So, if I understood it correctly, being
Sure.
a pre-seed or a seed startup, I can actually, let's say, of course, I can go the VC pathway, I can go the bootstrapping pathway,
Yeah.
but there also opens another possibility of going a corporate venture pathway, where a
Sure.
startup can look for a big, enormous company for
Mm.
which they may have something valuable. They may offer a valuable service, and the venture, the corporate, can actually end up investing in the startup.
Yeah, exactly. We call it corporate venture capital.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very interesting way to put it, because it's people think that it can't be done. Corporates investing into startups, it makes no sense. But what corporates essentially do is use this as a way to strategically align with new technologies and have a kind of a larger part to play in the startup rather than just a customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what we would say with corporate venture capital is that corporates should approach this with a venture capital standpoint of investing in a lot of different companies, but corporates have the research and the data from what they know from doing business already. So in essence, in my perspective, corporate venture capital has a one up on traditional venture capital, because if a startup goes to a corporate and the corporate likes them and makes an investment, that startup now has access to the corporate's employees, the corporate's data sets, the corporate's
Mm-hmm.
customers, everything which this large company, this large corporate has built up over a long time. So it's very attractive for startups to work with a corporate. The only con is with this, and the only downside is that if the corporate's not set up in the right way with their investment strategy,
Mm-hmm.
then the startup might find that they are getting some bureaucracy and some corporate
Of course.
obstacles in return for that money.
Yeah, the thing that sometimes people run away from
Sure,
into the startup community.
exactly. So it's kind of on the burden is on the startup to do their due diligence and not just be chasing cash. You
Mm-hmm.
need to be chasing smart money, right? It's very easy in today's world to get money. Money is cheap, okay? So there are a number of VC firms, a number of different places where you can get capital. But for the startups that really want to have longevity to their business and not just be chasing an exit, they need to be diligent on who they take the money from and why, which leads to the other point of corporate venture capital is usually in the long-term game, right? Whereas VCs are in the 3 to 5 year game and then an exit, right? And again, back to Simon Sinek, right? Is a great guy for leadership and how you should look at life. And this is the Infinite Game, his new book. I'm doing a bit of a plug for him, but this whole thesis that I have is that startups should be looking at the long term, just the same as the corporates, right? You don't want to be looking for the quick wins unless it's to do with learning or validating your business, because in the long term, if you're in it for the real reasons, the real mission, the real vision, you're not just in it for the cash, right, or the payout. So that's the same as corporates have when they make investments is, yes, they have to obviously show an ROI, a return on investment, but they're looking for what fits into their business to benefit their corporate customers and benefit the company strategically, rather than just throwing money everywhere and seeing what exits with a nice return after 3 5 years. So I'm more biased towards the corporate venture capital side, but
Of
it's
course.
really up to the startup to think about what they want.
So you actually touched on an interesting thing, because I wanted to ask you for tips, but you already started doing it yourself. And I want to say, and go back to maybe the place you work every day when you have more expertise. So what would be the three biggest advice that you could give for employees that are within a corporate structure that they would like to do something of their own?
Sure. I'm never good with these 3 tips, why? Because I
It
tend to
can be
waffle.
one, it can be two, it can be 10
So
if you want.
I'll just give a light peppering.
Go for it.
So ultimately, the team is what's most important with these ventures. You've got to have an employee who is passionate and is not just picking an idea because they think it's going to get them a promotion, but actually is truly invested in this idea emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
So when we've gone into the corporate pool and seen people who have succeeded, they come from that similar background of what problem they're trying to solve. So if it's for a baby company, then it's probably a mother or someone who's got some interest in that area or has battled with something or seen it firsthand. If it's an agriculture idea, it's someone who's worked in that area, who's seen the issues firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
So the passion is like number one, but also honesty as well, because honesty leads to trust, it leads to community, and honesty allows you to actually take a step back and not and to actually be open that you don't know all the answers. And when you don't know all the answers, it actually leads to the 2 things that I mentioned. It leads to the trust, because people trust you to be an expert in the areas that you know, and then they're willing to trust you and help you out with the things that you don't know. And that's where we found uh, internal employees get the most success, is where they are honest about what they don't know, they're honest about what they do know, and then we then fill in the gaps with additional support.
Mm-hmm.
Other things which I would say for internal employees is be courageous. So it's similar to the honesty, it's being vulnerable, but also in a corporate environment, this is where leadership has to give that kind of air cover
Mm-hmm.
to employees to be safe in speaking up. And this is a middle management This is a middle management focus, even more so than a leadership focus, because these are the line managers. And then the employees should be courageous enough to speak up, come up with ideas, go over the top of someone's head in less sensitive environments to come up with ideas and pitch them to senior people. The problem is that with all of these things, there's a lot of bureaucracy in a corporate which needs to be ironed out before getting started with these initiatives and giving the employees a platform to create their ventures. Because what you don't want is to give people a platform to create ideas, and then when they come up with an idea, you stomp on it, and then they never come up with an idea ever again.
Yep.
So I think with all of this, it can't just be we want to do innovation and this is how we do it. Corporates have to be quite sensitive that everything that they do, say, or action has consequences, good and bad. And we try to get corporates into the good section, but it could just be one thing that someone said in a meeting which really has a negative effect on that employee. So, I think, passion, honesty, courage, they're the kind of three main traits.
You see, that wasn't bad at all. I mean,
We got that.
These are good advice. Okay, so to sum up, because I don't want to keep you much longer, there is yet another way to seek funding when you are a startup, which is tapping into the corporate venture capital. And at the same time, there is another way of creating your own startup without leaving your steady source of income, which is the intrapreneurship. I think it's incredibly interesting, and I really thank you for shedding a little bit of light on that for us and for our members. There's also one last thing, because I know that you also do a podcast of your own, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to tell people what you actually do. So you are a host of the secret sauce of innovation, and I would like to ask you what it is and what do you do. What are your videos about?
Yeah, so the secret source of innovation, I wanted to get away from the Innovation 101 boring titles and just add a bit of spice to it. I think innovation should be fun. I think it should be simple as well. And this podcast kind of came up where I do a lot of reading and looking at articles, books, etc. There's a lot of information out there. A lot of it does contradict one another, and there's a lot of waffle. And what I do in the podcast is bring my nearest and dearest network and those who I meet while I'm on my journey and bring them to the table and have a chat. And normally it takes the form of a topic that we talk about because that person's an expert. But it's gone down really well. We've had 5 episodes so far, all from different backgrounds of corporate innovation, corporate venture capital, all the way to startup investments, and even we got blockchain and crypto. So it's going well. I'm just one person doing it because that's all I've got right now. And what I want to achieve on the next round, we're going to do some more, is to fill in the gaps of what we haven't covered already. Make it nice and simple still, bite-sized for people to understand, and to start building a bit of a community and a buzz around simplifying innovation, not making it too complex, and making it accessible to all corporates. You don't need to be Google to innovate.
Great. All right, Dan. So I hope that whoever is watching us right now will drop by and watch some secret sauce of innovation. So thank you for being with us today, Dan Dsouza. It was an incredible pleasure.
Great. I just before we wrap up, I'll just let people know where they can find that podcast and
Yeah, of
interact.
course.
So on LinkedIn, if you just type in Dan Dsouza, DANDSOUZA after the linkedin.com, then you'll find my page and I post everything up there. I'm not famous enough to have it on all platforms, but it's just on LinkedIn and YouTube, and then you can interact, leave a comment, a like, and get in touch, and we'll build a community.
The link will also be with this video, so it will be easier to get from this video to all your content.
Perfect. No, it's great talking to you, Kuba. Amazing.
It really is has been a pleasure. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Dan. Again.